My name is Brett Compton. I can't be objective when it comes to how my family should be perceived. If you want a different perspective on things, you'll have to ask my mom, dad, sister, or brother. This is my story, my perception. My mother and father were superstars in their respective professions. My older brother and sister were superstars in school, excelling in both academics and sports. All my family members were beautiful. I was the third child, and compared to the other four, I was a mediocre, stupid, and ugly duckling. My parents always seemed to find time for their two beautiful and talented children, but almost never for me. It distorts your personality when, as a child, you are constantly looking for love and attention, but hardly receive it. To my siblings, I was a nuisance, to my parents, a thought in the background, or perhaps a disgrace. My distorted personality also affected my relationships with my peers. I was not particularly popular and had few friends. Life was pretty lousy until I turned 18. After that, she got even worse. After I turned 18, three things happened that broke me even more and completely destroyed my relationship with my parents. The first two, I found out that each of my parents was cheating and told the other about it supposedly in confidence in the hope of winning some love or at least attention. They shared information with each other, with each denying guilt to the other. The atmosphere in the house became even colder. Third, one of my friends accused me of allegedly making her a child. I didn't even have sex with her. I think she was just looking for easy money and wanted to get something from my parents. She threatened to publicly stir up a scandal. Her parents, always concerned about their image, paid her, ignoring my protests that not only was I not the father, but that I had not slept with her at all. This was before the days when DNA tests were common and affordable. Another failure for Brett, that's what my father thought. As a result of all three of these situations, my parents kicked me out of the house without further ado. I had a few things: clothes in 2 bags, 1,000 in cash, a laptop, a 6-year-old 125cc Honda motorcycle, CM, costing about 1,200, and almost nothing else. The only advantages I had were that I was educated, not much of an accomplishment, and although not an athlete, I was strong even for my 6'2", 225-pound frame. I got a hard job as a loader, moving boxes of goods from a warehouse to trucks in a nearby town. He lived in a boarding house and suffered from a personality disorder. The only joy in my life was that I could afford a prostitute once every 2 weeks, since I did not have the confidence, looks, or money to start a relationship with a woman I liked. A couple of girls of easy virtue seemed to take a liking to me, perhaps because I was never rude to them, although I did not have a bright personality, and was always grateful and made discounts. They also said I was a great lover, but isn't that what they always tell clients? My life didn't improve until I got lucky. I was on the street late at night on Saturday, or rather, it was already Sunday after a bad sexual experience with a girl of easy virtue with whom I had not slept before. It was a bad week at work, made even more annoying by the fact that I tried to call my mother, but she didn't answer my calls and changed her cell number without giving me a new one. I sometimes made unsuccessful attempts to contact my parents, but was never invited home for the holidays. In a very bad mood, I came across a disturbing scene. A middle-aged man beat a woman. I don't usually interfere in other people's affairs, but being in such a bad mood, I was ready to let off some steam. There was a fight. "Are you okay?" This was my brilliant question to the woman who was leaning on a lamppost. Her clothes looked expensive, and she was wearing an expensive necklace, watch, and rings. "I'm not sure," she replied, rolling her eyes. "You should probably go to the hospital," I said, my next brilliant thought. "I'm not sure I can get there," she groaned. "Do you have a car?" "Yep, it's in the parking lot across the street," she said, nodding toward the well-marked 3-story parking lot. "I'll take you," I offered. "Thank you very much," the woman said. The woman's car turned out to be a new Mercedes 500 SL. She clearly had money. While we were driving to the hospital, we talked enough to exchange basic information. Her name was Linda Patton. When we got to the emergency room, I helped her out of the car. She grabbed my hand tightly and looked at me with a frightened, pleading look. Brett, after you park the car, will you stay with me? I promise I will repay you. I had nothing better to do and felt good for the first time in a long time, so I said, sure. While I was waiting for Linda in the waiting room, two police officers came in. Apparently, they had been called by the hospital staff. The receptionist identified me as the person accompanying Linda, and they took me to the far corner of the room to make a statement. What happened was the logical first question from a male police officer. I explained the whole story. After a 4-minute story, the policewoman asked, "Did you know these people?" "No, I saw them for the first time in my life." "Perhaps Linda knows them. I didn't ask her when I drove her here in her car." "Thank you," the policewoman said as she finished writing on her notepad. "Miss Patton is at the doctor's now?" "I think so. She left with the nurse right after I parked the car." I took Linda home. When we arrived at her townhouse in a very prestigious area, it was already after 3 o'clock in the morning. I parked in her 3-car garage. The other 2 compartments contained a Range Rover and a nearly new Harley 1-in-100cc. My eyes widened when I saw the Harley. As soon as I turned off the engine, Linda touched my arm, looked at me and said, "Brett, it's too late to call a taxi. Stay here overnight. I have 3 bedrooms that I don't use. Tomorrow I'll order you a taxi, and if I can drive, I'll take you home myself. Or you can give me a Harley until you get better," I replied with a big grin on my face. "We'll see," she said, smiling slightly for the first time that night, although it clearly hurt her. The queen bed in the largest guest room was very comfortable. I showered in the attached bathroom and fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. I woke up to the smell of breakfast. When I went down to the kitchen, Linda was already standing at the stove in her robe. "I'm not much of a housewife," she said, "but I thought you might like breakfast, so I tried it." "Thank you," I replied with a smile. "Smells delicious." Linda turned out to be right. She is not much of a housewife. The bacon was flabby, the eggs were a little undercooked, and the toast was slightly burnt, but I was hungry and ate with enthusiasm. This obviously pleased her, as did the fact that I put the dishes away and loaded them into the dishwasher. "Should I launch it?" I asked, since it was almost full. "No need. My housekeeper Joyce will come tomorrow, and she will take care of it. Shall we talk?" Linda was easy to talk to and a great listener. She pulled something out of me that I had never really told anyone, perhaps because it was a combination of her obvious keen intelligence, her ability to empathize, and her beautiful legs. The latter, of course, should not have mattered, but it did. After I relieved my soul and we drank and got rid of the 2 pots of coffee that I brewed so as not to spoil the drink, she also opened up a little. Over the next hour, I learned she was rich all her life. Her parents were rich, and she also earned her money. She attended an Ivy League and a top medical school. She's 40 years old, and she's in the process of getting a divorce. She is a top plastic surgeon and very successful. I even remembered a couple of her commercials on TV. The day before she went to a nightclub alone for the first time. She had never done this before, but decided to try it because she needed support after the stress of a divorce. Obviously, she chose the wrong man with whom she danced and communicated. After he bought her a couple of drinks, he, and probably his friends, wanted more. When she refused, he became aggressive. She gave the police his name. It turned out that it was fake. The police called this morning while I was still sleeping. The Harley was the property of her future ex-husband, but she tried to get it through the court because of principle, since she herself bought it as a gift for her husband 18 months ago, and the ownership rights are in her name. She did not ride it herself. "Brett, I am very grateful for what you have done for me. I know I won't do this again, but I still worry about my safety. I think the bastard who beat me might have recognized me, even though I didn't tell him my last name. Judging by your stories, you also have problems. Maybe you could do me one more favor and stay at my house for a couple of weeks when you're not working. I have ideas on how I could help you because I feel that you are full of resentment towards your family." I thought for a minute. "This is a generous offer, Linda. I don't want to disturb you. Besides, Perhaps my problems are related to the fact that I am difficult to get along with. Linda laughed. This is my second divorce, so it's probably even harder to get along with me. Think about it. Do you think you can help me in the future? I asked, getting to the point. I'll pay for your college education in a major you're interested in, refer you to my psychologist so you can talk through your problems, and no offense, I'll do a little work on your face. You're actually a nice guy, but you obviously have an inferiority complex because of the attractiveness of the rest of your family. With a few minor changes to your nose, ears, and cheekbones, I can make you a model, Linda said casually, and then gave me her biggest smile of the day. I stared at her for a good 3 minutes, without saying a word, contemplating her offer. Let's try to live together for 2 weeks, and if during this time we don't hate each other, maybe this is the chance I've been waiting for in life for so long. Wonderful, she exclaimed joyfully, rising to her feet. When she did this, her robe parted, and I saw her hips. They were really beautiful. Not that I ever planned to pet them, but it was nice to admire. Why don't you take either a Harley or a Range Rover and go get your things to the boarding house and then come back here tonight? I looked at my watch. It was already about noon. We talked for almost 3 hours. I broke into a wide smile. Where are the keys to the Harley? I laughed. The next 2 weeks flew by. Since Linda was still on painkillers for the first few days, she didn't want to drive, so I drove her to work in the mornings and picked her up in the evenings. The first 3 days in her Mercedes and the remaining 2 in the Harley. She squealed and laughed the entire 3-mile ride on the Harley, hugging me tightly. For the first week, she did not perform operations, doing only consultations and seeing patients, but as soon as she came off painkillers, she returned to surgical interventions. Her work schedule was much longer than mine, so I took the time away while waiting for her, playing pool, bowling, or working out at the gym she was a member of. When all the bandages were removed from Linda, she turned out to be, which was perhaps not surprising, given her profession, a very beautiful woman. Her face didn't look 40, and neither did her body, as far as I could tell. We had breakfast and dinner together. I prepared breakfast myself from products that the housekeeper bought, and for dinners we either went to restaurants or ordered food home, although a couple of times during these 2 weeks Joyce cooked dinner for us. Linda really was completely unsuited to housekeeping. Being with Linda, I noticed that some of the rough edges in my personality had smoothed out. She said the same thing happened to her. On Sunday, exactly 2 weeks had passed since I moved in with her. We decided to have a conversation to discuss what to do next. I was a little surprised when Linda showed up to our meeting in the living room wearing very short shorts and a tank top. Her legs and breasts looked amazing. She opened a bottle of wine and we started talking. So, Brett, we haven't been trying to kill each other for the last 2 weeks. What's more, I seem to get along with you better than most people I encounter, and I haven't seen any real nasty character traits in you. Why don't you move in with me, work in my office part-time, and start studying at my expense? There are actually courses that I would like to take. I was always interested in graphic art, but I never followed my interest, and no one encouraged me to do so. My problem is that I will feel like a parasite living at your expense. I'm not sure I can stand it. Brett, I feel safe when you're around. I haven't felt this way in a long time, perhaps due to my own neuroses, but I'm still worried that the bastard who hurt me might show up again. Plus, I'll actually make you work in my office. There are things that need to be done that you could easily do. It would help me, and you would get paid. You would have your own money. We talked for about an hour, drinking and discussing the future. After we finished the second bottle of wine, we were both in good spirits. And then Linda stunned me. And the last thing that was hard for me to say without a bottle of wine. But now that we've had a drink, I can express myself. I have sexual needs that I would like to satisfy. I pride myself on being good in bed. I know you don't have a girlfriend. Maybe we could help each other. As she uttered the phrase, maybe we could help each other, she began to undress. Of course, I didn't refuse her offer. On Monday, I moved all my stuff out of the boarding house, sold my Honda 125 motorcycle to one of the guys who lived there, quit my job, and moved into the master bedroom at Linda's house. Linda and I had far fewer problems than most people who live together. There were many reasons for this, but perhaps the most important was that neither of us expected to fall in love with the other. We were both not looking for a real romantic relationship at the time and knew that if either of us met someone to hook up with, our sexual relationship would end. At the same time, we took great pleasure in satisfying each other's needs. We also didn't feel obligated to spend all our free time with each other. It was the perfect friends with benefits relationship. Linda was wonderful in bed. She was much better than any girl I had ever dated, and certainly better than any prostitute I had ever been with. She was also much more experienced than me and taught me a lot. I actually took a graphic arts class at a local college, and after the first semester, one of Linda's associate's doctors generally don't like to work with people they have a personal relationship with made the changes Linda suggested to my nose, ears, and cheekbones. I was bandaged for 3 weeks. Once the bandages were removed, and then once I was fully recovered, I was amazed at how positively my new appearance affected me. Linda assured me that I was now in the top 5 hottest guys my age, and that really made me feel better. Linda's psychologist was also incredibly helpful. Dr. Lisa Patterson was not at all what I imagined a psychologist to be, and it wasn't just because of her appearance. She was probably in her late 50s, but she had the body of an athlete, which stood in stark contrast to her almost entirely gray hair. She wore tight clothing, which most people would consider inappropriate for her profession. Her whole approach and manner of communication were more unusual than her appearance, and she readily admitted that her methods were unconventional. But she was also clearly intelligent and insightful, and after just 3 sessions, she seemed to get to the core of my problems. Brett, you're kind of in a frozen state right now. Your neuroses do not manifest themselves in aggressive behavior simply because you are currently in a satisfying sexual relationship with Linda, and she is clearly committed to supporting your interests, which you have never experienced before in your life. However, there will come a time when one of you ends this relationship, and then you will have to deal with your problems before that time. Sounds like good advice, but how can I get rid of my problems if, as you mentioned, they are so deeply rooted? I asked. There are only 2 ways. Both are related to your parents. Although you have problems with your siblings, I think you can deal with them by simply ignoring them because they are not the real cause of your problems. As for your parents, you need to either forgive them unconditionally or take revenge on them. These are the only 2 ways that can help, Lisa continued. I know that psychologists generally do not recommend revenge. Every psychologist I've ever heard of says that revenge is never satisfying and is more poisonous than liberating. But Lisa was different. I never thought a psychologist would recommend revenge. I blurted out with what must have been a devilish smile on my face. I didn't say I recommended her. Forgiveness is better. But based on the results of our sessions, I don't think this will work in your case. In my 30-year career, I have only had 2 patients with problems as severe as yours for whom forgiveness was not possible. For both of them, revenge worked. Their revenge was that they destroyed the relationships of those people with whom they had problems. After this, both patients were able to move on with their lives, their relationships with other people improved significantly, and they were as happy as they could be. I rubbed my chin. Destroyed their relationship, right? Interesting concept. Listen, Brett, Lisa continued, we will work on forgiveness, but if at some point I see that it is unattainable, I will help you think through the measure of revenge and precisely measure. Sounds like a plan, I chuckled. It was more than 2 years before Linda found someone she wanted to be romantically involved with, and by then I had already graduated from college. Linda didn't want to be thrice divorced. Her first 2 divorces made her more cautious, although this played into my hands. With the help of Linda and Lisa, I faced many of my demons and, along with my new face and a degree in graphic design, I began to feel much better about myself. Although Linda and I continued to communicate, and she remained my mentor, about 2.5 years after I moved in with her, I rented my own apartment and took a job as a graphic designer at Sea-Doo Graphics, a small but well-known company engaged in graphic arts and public relations. Linda's plastic surgery clinic became a client of my new company. I discovered that I actually had a talent, the first one I had ever recognized in myself, for working with programs like Photoshop and other graphic design-related software, and I quickly moved up the career ladder. When the owner of Sea-Doo Graphics began to have health problems, Linda co-signed a $500,000 loan so that I could own my own business at the age of 26. I immediately registered the company as Sea-Doo Graphics LLC and convinced Linda to pay off the $200,000 loan for 40% of the company's stock, so I would have more working capital. Additionally, being completely honest and friendly with her new boyfriend, Jackson Winters, gave me valuable business advice. Jackson was a successful businessman, a year younger than Linda, and seemed to have as much money as her. His advice helped me grow my business quickly, but carefully, and I doubled my income within a year. I also had no shortage of female attention, no more prostitutes. Now I actually started dating for real and found that if I applied what Linda taught me, I was in high demand among women my age. I realized that my attractiveness was largely due to my new face and the fact that I exercised regularly, but I also tried to work on my character. But not everything was so rosy in my life. I still had problems with my family. As Lisa predicted, I was slowly but surely moving towards ignoring my brother and sister, but things were not going well with my parents' forgiveness. Over a period of 2 years, I was bombarded with newspaper announcements of weddings. First my brother, then my sister, and then my father and mother. Apparently, they were divorced and did not even bother to tell me. I did not receive an invitation to either wedding, and when I tried to contact my brother and then my sister after their wedding, they did not respond. I did, however, attend my sister Rosalind's wedding, although not the reception. I wanted to see if anyone in my family would recognize me, given my significant changes from plastic surgery and the fact that I now professionally dyed my hair light brown and dressed stylishly, and also look at their reaction if they do recognize me. I exchanged glances with 2 members of my family during the preparation, and during the ceremony itself, shook hands with all of them in the greeting line, but did not see the slightest sign that I was recognized. Of course, at that point it had been almost 9 years since I had seen my parents, and almost 10 since I had seen my sister or brother. I have noted their lack of response for future reference. After every wedding announcement, and especially after attending my sister's wedding, I had long discussions with Lisa about it. By the time my mother was married, Lisa had accepted that she saw no hope that I could find forgiveness in my heart, and that revenge was probably the only option for my mental health. I made it clear that my revenge should be directed not only at my parents, but also at my sister Rosalind and my brother Clayton. I couldn't just ignore them. As you know, Brett, but I want to emphasize this one last time, your revenge can only concern the violation of their personal relationship. There should be no violence, economic damage, vandalism, or anything like that. And no illegal substances. The only way that will bring you relief is to destroy their relationship, and no illegal substances, including alcohol, should be directly involved. And most importantly, if I see violence on your part, I will be obliged to report it to the police. Don't make me do this, I really like you, Dr. Patterson said, holding my hand. I understand, Lisa, you made this very clear from the very beginning. I promise nothing other than interfering with their relationship and no illegal substances. A week after my 28th birthday, I began my mission for revenge. My plans for my mother, father, and brother were clear, but for my sister less certain, but I was confident that I would come up with something. I was the first to take revenge on my mother. She was the easiest to deal with because she held a senior position in a charity and her new husband was a local politician. Having gained access to their house through a painter who was doing renovations there and was not very careful about closing the doors after finishing the job, I used the services of professionals, men and women, to take the necessary photographs. The professional woman was about the same height and skin color as my mother. She had a distinctive tattoo, but I was going to use Photoshop for all the photos, so that wasn't an issue. I took a series of pictures in the living room of my house where this woman was having sex with him. I also took some photos of my mother at two different social events she attended with her husband, one of which was a picnic. There were details that suited me perfectly. Using my outstanding Photoshop skills and the high-tech equipment I had purchased over the past year that had made my company, C-Do Graphics LLC, an industry leader, I placed a rose on the model's shoulder, the same tattoo as my mother's, removed the model's tattoo, and perfectly replaced the model's face with my mother's face. I made sure the hair length and other features were accurate and also included a newspaper with a clear date on one of the photos. The date, the private investigator said my stepfather was out of town and my mother was home alone. When I printed the photos, 8 out of the 10 I processed were perfect. Only an expert of my skill level would have been able to determine that they were counterfeit. I threw out the 2 that weren't good enough, made sure there were no fingerprints or DNA on the photos, put the 8 photos in an envelope with a red, confidential stamp, and mailed it to my mother's husband at work. I was pleased to see 2 months later in the local newspaper, Alderman John Stanton and his wife Julia have filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. 1 ready, 3 left. From all the information my private investigator had collected on my father's new wife, April, she was a gold digger. She was only 3 years older than me and did not have the most honorable reputation before she became Mrs. Charles Compton. In addition, as it became known, she sometimes overdid alcohol at charity events with an open bar. I myself attended one of these events, skillfully cutting her off from the rest of the company, treating her to drinks and flirting. April turned out to be a promiscuous woman, no doubt about it. I was surprised that my usually perceptive father did not realize this, but from my observations of them at 3 charity events, in restaurants and other places, I came to the conclusion that he really did not notice anything. Besides, I didn't like her personality, but I wasn't going to have sex with her based on personality. At the 3rd fundraiser, when April was already pretty drunk, she complained to me that my Charles, as she called my father, was going on a business trip to Hawaii for a week, and she was angry that she couldn't go with him. "Let me take you to dinner and a show while he's gone to distract you," I smiled, holding her hand. She giggled and then said, "You're bad," and after a pause added, "Okay, here's my phone number, call Bill," handing me a napkin with the number written on it. She called me Bill because, in preparation for revenge, I made myself a new set of documents with my outstanding graphic art skills, where my name was Bill Watson. April was an easy target. She didn't even want to go to the show after dinner. I convinced her to come to my house. She didn't even notice the small video camera I had installed, along with my wallet and belt, on the bedside table in the bedroom. April was a good lover, but she was far from Linda's level, in every sense. I tried my best to impress because I wanted to achieve my goal. When she came to her senses, she realized that I had not used protection and said, "Charles had the procedure, I am not taking the pills, and I cannot get pregnant." "Of course not," I said with a grin. This suddenly changed my plan. I didn't know my dad had the procedure or that April wasn't taking her pills. Instead of giving my father the video, I decided to escalate my revenge by getting April pregnant. Despite April's personality, which became more and more disgusting the longer I knew her, I wanted to make sure she got pregnant. Then I simply disappeared from her life. My plan was to monitor her to see if she is pregnant and how the pregnancy is progressing. But if she gets rid of the pregnancy despite her words, I will send the video to the father. 5 months later, April was visibly pregnant. About 8 months later, the birth of a boy was announced, and to my surprise, she and Charles remained married. She was probably the best piece of ass my father could have access to, and he didn't want to give her up. Perhaps she convinced him that the procedure he had undergone was not suitable. Perhaps he didn't want any scandal. In any case, the thought of my father raising my child gave me the most pleasant feeling I had ever experienced until that moment. I hoped that Clayton's wife, Jennifer, who was 2 years older than me, would be as easy to seduce as April. I have known Jennifer since she was a real estate agent, and also since I bought an apartment from her and talked to her about getting a new location for my business. She was very personable without being slutty. However, I felt anxious about her marriage, so I did my best to become friends with her, hoping that this might eventually lead to her agreeing to have sex so that I could tape her and send the tape to Clayton. Things were going slowly. Since things were slow with Clayton Jennifer, I started working on something for Rosalind at the same time. I had a hard time coming up with something for Rosalind, especially since I didn't want a repeat of the situation with her mother, since I'm sure she and Rosalind were talking and commiserating with the ghost of her mother's photo all the time, and this would raise suspicions. Through some other people, I learned that Rosalind and her husband Philip were most likely in an open marriage. This made the task more difficult, since providing Philip with a video of her having sex would not have been a big deal. Philip played in a softball league. Although I liked softball, as I mentioned earlier, I was not a good athlete and did not believe that I had what it took to join the team in the league he played in, especially since that league was mostly played by experienced players. However, I learned from the league directors that they are always looking for sponsors, so I found a way to sponsor his team through C-Do Graphics LLC. To communicate with him, I used my pseudonym Bill Watson and made it my mission to become one of the guys. I drank beer with Philip and his teammates after every game and got to know Philip quite well. I didn't particularly like Philip, in fact. There were only two members of the team that I would have found friends with under normal circumstances, but I hung out with him for a reason. One night after a particularly good win, he asked for a ride home because he wanted to get drunk, and Rosalind is with her mother tonight, so I don't care if I come home drunk. I was happy to offer him a ride and provide him with beer. He achieved his goal. On the way home, drunk Philip was very talkative and friendly. I got him to talk about his open marriage, and he told me all about it. He said that the open marriage was more his idea than Rosalind's, but that she would go to partner swapping sessions with him. I'm sure a good, hick, looking, hick, dude. I like that you have a bitchy girl. Do you want to come to the, hick, next event? He came out when I helped him up onto the porch. I expressed interest and he invited me in. I still wasn't sure what I was going to do, maybe secretly make a video of Rosalind having sex with some other guy and send it to other family members to embarrass her, although that probably wasn't enough. In any case, Philip insisted that I write down the date and location of the next session, gave me his mobile phone number, and told me to call and confirm next week. I called Philip 2 days later, when he was completely sober, and, surprisingly, he completely remembered our conversation. He said he spoke with other members of the group and reissued the invitation. However, there is one change in the plans. It will be at my house, but you already know where it is, he said. This took me back a little. However, when I thought about it, I didn't see what difference it made, so I agreed. Although I dated a few women, albeit without a steady girlfriend, they were all normal, nice women, and I couldn't even bring myself to ask one of them to go to this party. However, a girl of easy virtue will probably agree to go. I contacted the upscale service, told them what I wanted, and they suggested that I meet Lily at a bar to see if she was acceptable to me, and for me to explain to her what I wanted to see if we could get her to what was then a mutually acceptable economic agreement. Lily was perfectly acceptable. Long red hair, sparkling cat-like green eyes, big breasts, round ass, adorable face, and smile. Are all the guys there as nice as you? Lily grinned, stroking my arm as we sat at a table at a local bar, me with a beer, she with a pina colada. After my plastic surgery almost 9 years ago and training 3 times a week, I usually got a cute reaction. I loved it and knew how to deal with it. I don't know, I've never been there before. The only guy I know for sure is cute and 4 years older than me. I don't know about the rest. You just need to be available to someone, and I believe you will find a guy to your liking. Who are you dating? Lily asked, batting her eyelashes. Will I be able to? Throwing her long red hair off her shoulders, at the same time she batted her eyelashes again. It's complicated. I'm here primarily to observe, but I'll probably have to have sex with at least one to keep my cover, I chuckled. We talked a little more and came to a price of $100. I was a little nervous arriving at Rosalind and Philip's house. I was deliberately a little late, hoping that in the crowd of people Roslyn would be less likely to recognize me. Even though she didn't recognize me at the wedding 2 years ago, I was nervous that if we were in close contact, she would. I was also not sure that I would be caught with the micro video cameras I had, since one of the rules of the club was no photographs. When we arrived, there were 12 people there, apparently 6 men and 6 women, since single participants were not allowed. Lily was a big hit with the kids. She seemed to love Philip, and he was really interested in her. I tried to stay in the background, watching Roslyn. However, my plans were interrupted when Lily and Philip went upstairs, and I saw Roslyn heading towards me. I tried to move towards the fireplace in the living room, but she tracked me. "Hello, handsome." Philip wasn't kidding when he said he invited someone who would be interesting to me. "You're the most handsome guy we've ever had," she gushed, rubbing her finger over my chest. "But I feel like I know you." Shit, I'm nailed. She will definitely recognize me as soon as I start talking to her, I thought to myself, keeping a smile on my face. Then I realized and hoped that what she said was just a remark and not a confession at all. "Oh, thank you, sweet lady," I replied, trying unsuccessfully to disguise my voice. "I can assure you that we have never met. I would remember you." "How sweet," she purred. We started talking about things in general, but she soon turned the conversation to sex. Then I noticed photographs of her wedding on the mantelpiece with my parents and brother. To stop myself while I was trying to figure out a way out, I asked, "So who are these people in your wedding photo?" "Well, besides Philip and me," she said, "it's my mother Julia, my father Charles, my brother Clayton, and his wife Jennifer." "So you only have one brother and sister." I more or less coughed, pretending there was a frog stuck in my throat. "I actually have another brother, but he's the biggest jerk in history, and no one in my family talks to him anymore." "Oh, really?" I faltered. "What's his problem?" "He's stupid, slow, ugly, and disgusting," she chuckled. "Is he married?" I asked, trying to think a little more on the fly about what to do. "I doubt it. No woman can stand sex with her. But enough about him. What about you, stud?" she muttered. I'm sure I started to sweat for 2 reasons. First, my sister came up to me. Secondly, anger seethed inside me at the way she characterized me. Still not knowing what to do, I knew there was no longer a smile on my face. "What is this?" she grinned as she pulled out my cameras. "What a bad boy you are. Don't you know the first rule of the club? Except, don't tell the club," she giggled, very proud of herself. "No cameras." Sorry, I didn't know," I answered awkwardly and tried to walk away from her. Entering the living room, I saw Lily and Philip coming down the stairs. There was a truly pleased expression on his face. She looked bored and smiled fakely. "Hey, honey, I hope you had fun," I grinned. "Uh, of course," Lily replied. And although my sister discovered and took the cameras from me, that was not all, and I still managed to take a couple of incriminating videos with her participation and send them to her relatives and friends. There are 3, 1 left. My luck ran out when it came to Jennifer, Clayton's wife. She didn't look like the prostitute my father married or my sister. I started to have real feelings for her. She had the most charming smile, the most cheerful personality, and the most beautiful legs, even better than Linda, I often thought. Although Jennifer and I became good friends, whenever I tried to fall in love, she put me down. "Brett, I'm married. Even though I'm unhappy, I would never change. I really like you, but until I resolve my situation with Clayton, there is nothing I can do about us. Give me some time to either repair my marriage or decide to bail. If I get bail, you'll be the first person I call." "I'll give you space," I replied, "but can we continue talking, go to lunch, and be the good friends we've become?" "I bet," she beamed. Then she gave me a quick kiss on the lips and walked away, wiggling her ass almost as fantastically as her legs. At this point, I could no longer consciously deny that I had fallen in love with Jennifer. My plan to seduce her and send the video to Clayton was long abandoned. First of all, it wouldn't work because she was very loyal, but also because I could never do anything that would hurt or humiliate her. I came up with yet another diabolical plan to hasten Clayton and Jennifer's divorce, which I hoped was already on the horizon. Force Clayton to deceive and film it. I knew exactly the person who could help me, Lily. Lily and I were planning in advance how she would seduce and film Clayton when I got an urgent call from Jennifer. "Brett, can you pick me up?" she cried into the phone. "Where are you?" "At my house, 1220 Treetop Lane," she sobbed. Of course, I already knew where it was. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, I said, hurrying to my car and breaking the land speed record getting there. When I got to 1220, Jennifer wasn't outside. I knocked on the front door, no answer, but I heard a loud male voice inside and what sounded like crying. I screamed, "Open the damn door or I'll break it down." A few seconds later, Clayton opened the door with a frown on his face. "What the hell do you want?" "I want to see Jennifer." "She's not well, so get out," Clayton replied, trying to close the door on me. I looked inside and saw Jennifer getting up from the floor and crying. I opened the door. Jennifer ran up to me. Clayton began to get up, swearing at me. There was a fight. "Let me take my bag," Jennifer whined as she hurried to where she was lying, grabbed her suitcase, and headed back to me. I grabbed Jennifer's suitcase, and we hurried to the car and drove off. As we raced away, I didn't ask Jennifer any questions, and she quietly sobbed. After about 5 minutes of silence, she blurted out, "I'm divorcing Clayton. Do you know a good lawyer?" I smiled. "We'll find it," I answered enthusiastically. "What are our chances of a long-term relationship, Brett?" 99.9999, I replied with a big smile. Jennifer laid her head on my shoulder and grabbed my hand as I drove to the police station to record my bruises and issue a warrant for Clayton's arrest. Jennifer was the epitome of loyalty. Although she stayed in my guest room the night I rescued her from Clayton, she did not sleep with me until her divorce was final. Linda, as usual, helped us out. She now married to Jackson Winters, and Charm this time apparently allowed Jennifer to stay at her and Jackson's mansion and introduced Jennifer to the divorce lawyer Linda was using. Given the criminal case against Clayton for domestic violence and other shenanigans that Jennifer could testify to, he quickly broke down and the divorce was completed in record time. Luckily for me, because I wasn't interested in sex with anyone other than Jennifer. The day Jennifer's divorce became final, we went to a mountain resort and spent 4 days. We got married 2 weeks later, but only after I admitted that I was Clayton's brother, which didn't bother her at all. Only Jennifer's parents and sister Linda and Jackson were present at the ceremony. 3 months later, Jennifer became pregnant. I decided to go see Dr. Lisa Patterson for what I hoped would be my last visit. I haven't seen Lisa for over a year. By that time, only my mother's revenge had been achieved. "Give me full information," were her first words. I gave her the rundown and concluded with, "I know you said no violence, but in Clayton's case, there was nothing I could do. It was useful, though," I chuckled. "What was the most useful thing?" she asked. "Of course, I'll marry Jennifer. I'm madly in love, and now we're having a baby. I'm very happy, and in this particular case, it really doesn't matter that I stole her from Clayton. I would have been just as happy if I had met her in different circumstances." "What about the other 3? "I am completely satisfied." "You left a path of destruction, didn't you?" Lisa whistled. "The most remarkable thing is that now that I have taken revenge, I have also forgiven them, and I will never again have conscious thoughts about any of the 4 of them," I exulted. "I'm going to write an article about you for Psychology Today," Lisa laughed. "Now give me your last check for $400 and get out of here. I have patients who really need my help." My smile from the day grew even wider when I hugged Jennifer and kissed her stomach that night. I vowed to myself that my family would not be dysfunctional. My branch of the Compton family had to be ultra-functional. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next